So I really want to welcome Doug and Rachel. It's amazing to have you here. You're beloveds to my heart. You've newly met Aaron. I want to talk about a really cool connection between Doug and Aaron that's led to this conversation today. And you're really instrumental in bringing love and connection and better sex to literally millions of people. How's that feel?
Awesome.
Yeah.
when we were early in our marriage, we decided we needed to make more money. And we were like, well, we could do like phone sex. That would like...
I'd be really good at phone sex.
Like, or we could just take this awesome sex life and like package it up in a book and help take the wisdom that we had learned and give it to other people.
Amazing.
And that was the road we took. So we're glad that we didn't do the phone sex.
Yeah.
Was there an audiobook kind of like a halfway in between?
You did courses though.
Yes.
Courses and audiobooks for sure, everything.
Yeah. Amazing. So, well, why don't we start first with the first book was The Multi-Orgasmic Man, is that correct?
That was the first sex book.
And that's kind of your connection, so...
Yeah, that's actually how I started my own solo or self-practice, self-cultivation. The first time I ever played with myself, I guess you could say.
Jeez.
The Multi-Orgasmic Man.
Yeah.
And I mean, it really did set up my kind of perspective and take, though, on what the potential for sex was. In fact, I remember the first time I had a conversation with a friend around what we were talking about as masturbation. I was saying, oh yeah, when you do this thing, like it really gets quite intense, and the pleasure once you get over 40 minutes to an hour. He's like, what are you doing? and it's like, this is a 2-minute process. And I was like, what are you doing? And they were both like, are we doing the same thing? Like, let's check in here. Because it was just such a very different experience. And then finding out that for most guys, this is how they had trained themselves to have pleasure. Later, it wasn't a big surprise when they kind of approached sex that it kind of took that same perspective on the experience of sex.
So why the Multi-Orgasmic Man? What kind of initiated that as your first desire?
So the story of the Multi-Orgasmic Man is that I was studying at an Orthodox yeshiva in Jerusalem, and
most people's sex education
which is exactly. And Rachel and I were apart for a year, and then she came to stay with me in the basement of the synagogue where I was living.
That's kinky.
Yeah.
I remember that part in the book.
Side note, I almost died because I went so long without sex.
Okay, yeah.
It was really...
I would have died.
Challenging.
This
and
really...
then Doug had to become a multi-orgasmic man to keep up with it for all the last time.
Well, you're getting to the punchline.
Oh, there you go. I'll slow down.
So I was living at the basement of the synagogue, protecting it from this other group that was stoning the synagogue, the other group of Jews. And so I was living in the synagogue. And so I said to the rabbi of the synagogue, I said, so my girlfriend is coming to stay with me. Where should she stay? And he said, oh, she should stay with you in the basement of the synagogue. And I said, won't the parishioners mind? And he said, fuck them. And so he married us, actually. He came out to marry us. So Rachel stayed with me in the basement of the synagogue, and I was just working all day long. I was working at a shelter for battered women, and I was studying, and then trying to satisfy my girlfriend who I hadn't seen at night, and who was ravenous,
famished, dying.
I was literally
starving to death.
So making up for like 6 months of being apart, or 8 months at that point. And then I found this book on Taoist sexuality on just randomly on a bookshelf.
After I left and he was
in recovery.
This was so I found this book and I tried it out, and I was like, this stuff is amazing. And that was actually what gave me the energy to actually help satisfy my girlfriend before.
So this book was divinely sent.
It was divinely sent from the Orthodox yeshiva. No, so
your survival.
So I tried this thing where, I read in this book that you could have orgasm without ejaculation, and if you didn't ejaculate, you'd have more energy. And I was like, wow, that's a wild concept. And so that's when I tried it out with Rachel. And
what do you think, Rachel?
Still reliving
She wasn't
the moment.
thinking.
There wasn't a lot of thinking.
yeah.
It makes Doug's sexuality equivalent to my sexuality, where I can have many orgasms, different kinds of orgasms, different intensity of orgasms, like an unfolding field of pleasure. And it means Doug is the same.
So
It's a completely different thing. And when we met, we were 21
Okay.
children.
35 years ago.
We were having a lot of sex, but it was regular sex because Doug didn't know the practice. And so it just meant that the rhythm of lovemaking was really how long could Doug last and when did he need relief?
Yeah.
Right, and that's basically for most men.
Which I think is
the norm,
everybody,
right?
yeah, the
Exactly.
norm,
It's
yeah.
just kind of like your sexuality is you're waiting and you know, like you're trying to hold it off as long as you.
But you
can.
did good with that book because it's very archaic. It's not that easy to understand. So is this why you wanted to translate it to
yes, exactly.
high
So,
talk?
yeah, I mean, just, so the amazing thing, just to finish what Rachel's saying, is that you basically sexuality moves from this kind of experience of just trying to delay gratification as long as possible, and into these, like, you're in these orgasmic waves together, and it's just incredible. So I came back like a true believer. That's what, you know, I was like, I found the Tao at an Orthodox yeshiva, and so I came back and I was like, gave this book that I, you know, I found that Montauk Chia was the best, you know, kind of deepest teacher of this work. And, you know, I gave his book to a lot of my friends, and they were like, this sounds great, but I don't know what the hell.
Where to start.
Like, I don't understand what the hell he's talking about.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, you assholes, I'll write you a book that you can understand.
which the Multi-Orgasmic Man
Was that
was
book.
extraordinary for
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it was like, basically, my job was to say, Montauk Chia, this sounds really cool, but what are you talking about? And actually, one of my favorite memories from writing that book was, like, when I asked him about the $1 million spot, and he just like dropped his pants and pointed to it, you know, and so he was willing to be very explicit and very clear, and my job was to try to say, okay, I'm the every guy, you know, tell me how this really works for the rest of us, not some esoteric practice. And that was what led to Multi-Orgasmic Man.
And then, obviously, in your young self, it landed well.
I'm so psyched that it was a valuable introduction to solo cultivation for you and to your sexuality.
I mean, it was quite the extremely different of what I'd been hearing about in military school. And I mean, for whatever reason, I just had never really occurred to me. I mean, I'd heard about masturbation in sex ed, but maybe it's just like coming from a religious background, never really put two and two together, meaning hand and cock. And then eventually...
That's more one and one together.
or maybe two.
And
2 and 1? Okay.
we'll get into that next week.
The second book. That's why the Multi-Orgasmic Man has such a big smile on the front cover. But yeah, I just noticed, though, that it, as opposed to like where most guys would be bragging about how many times they came and how fast they were able to do it, which seemed like the kind of mark of bravado for the guys in military school, I was looking at more, well, what kind of felt state experiences could I bring myself into, and then kind of extend these states for longer and longer. So as opposed to racing towards some objective, it really did become this kind of meditation. I remember speaking over the summer that I literally walked into a Borders bookstore. I was going to the massage book section like I always did. And I saw this book and I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting. Well, this is a different massage. Maybe I should start developing.
It's a different massage.
Exactly.
And so I started to just practice over the summer. And I remember I had like several friends where I was like telling them about this for periods of, I don't know, like, about 3 months. And then when I got to school, I can't believe how much I had practiced and told them about what masturbation had kind of become to me. And
it prepared you to be a great lover too.
It started a different dialogue though around sex and gave it a different purpose, especially then I was not having intercourse with anyone at that time. I was a virgin, and so then when I then started to have sex, that kind of imprint of how I could orient around pleasure, but also to kind of what was the purpose of sexual activity became something to like really be a more like shared experience than just kind of race and chase towards some kind of like quick little contract.
I really like that the book, even for a virgin, especially, would be a really beautiful preparatory of getting to know yourself, but then also being a really great lover when you choose to engage that way.
My favorite story, so that book was probably the most stolen book that we have ever written.
Okay.
So,
this is mark of its success, though.
Because people would, I remember like journalists would say that they had it on their desk and it just kept disappearing. So they,
that way, okay, yeah.
But my favorite story was a friend of mine was on an airplane and she was sitting next to a Jesuit priest who was reading the Multi-Orgasmic Man on the plane. And speaking of religion, and she was like, wow, why are you reading this? You're celibate. And he's like, we need to understand how to work with the energy.
Yes.
Because, and I think that's the challenge for so many religious traditions, is that they suppress that sexual energy and then it comes out in all sorts of
sideways,
problematic ways. And so really what I love about the Taoist practice and the multi-orgasmic man and the multi-orgasmic couple and multi-orgasmic woman is that it is a sexual spiritual practice, and that it sees sexuality as part, because it comes out of the Chinese medical tradition, it sees it as a natural part of our self-expression and our health and our spiritual development. It's not some strange titillation or kind of back alley kink thing that, the way we treat so much of our sexuality in the West.
That was the thing I really loved about how you wrote the book, though, is because as opposed to emphasizing the spirituality or religion and like different terminology at the very beginning, you give people the exercise to have an experience that leads them to that conclusion naturally, so that it goes from a felt state, as opposed to kind of trying to have people think about it a certain way or try and live out a religion that maybe doesn't speak to them.
Exactly.
And then they miss out the experience. And I thought you did a really good job of that. So.
Thank you. I love the Taoist phrase, the prayer mat of the flesh.
There we go. Like, wow. Two words that don't normally go together, prayer and the flesh.
Which is just like, really, where do you experience transcendence? Where, it's in the bedroom for most people. Even as much or if not more than in our religious institutions.
And they found through research, Jenny Wade, over 4,000 normal people who don't know anything about Taoism or Tantra or anything, that everybody has the capacity for transcendent sexual experience. It's part of the human.
It's
capacity.
human.
It's part of our birthright.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then, did the couple book come next or the woman book come next?
The couples book.
Okay.
So oddly enough, the
Sure.
Multi-Orgasmic Man book was written while I was pregnant with our first child, and was really helpful in helping me stay home with him. And the Multi-Orgasmic Couple book, I was a medical resident, and
wow. Already.
We
working
were
110 hours a week.
And with a toddler. And
So
then
you never slept.
And then I got pregnant with twins.
Ooh. So for the average person, that's already like dead, no more sex.
Yeah. Oh, well, we had a lot of sex during residency because we had very little interaction. And at least for us, people are really different, but we have a lot of trust in our relationship. And so even when I was dead, tired, unconscious, I really couldn't have a conversation, we could make love.
Yeah.
And it's that intense sharing of our energies and the mixing of them and us coming into balance with each other that allows us to be married.
Yeah.
It was rough.
Yeah.
It was very hard on our marriage. And then I got pregnant with twins, and while pregnant with them, because I had premature contractions, got put on pelvic rest.
Oh gosh.
Which means no sexual activity.
Pelvic rest means not only no sex, but no orgasms.
Yeah.
Which for this girl,
Did you even
It's
be
like
able
breathing.
to? Were you even able to look at? Were you even able to look at him? Instead of Don Juan over here.
it was torture. It was so difficult. And I had to write the multi-orgasmic couple weeks
You had to write her
at
chapters
that time.
during
So I had to
Some
write
salt
about
in the wound.
sex and orgasm
And not have it.
and not have any orgasms.
I mean, you really get to build up some players'
Holy
anticipation.
shit.
Well, here's a question though, because I love the multi-orgasmic man, multi-orgasmic woman. They talk about the importance of solo practice, and most people will think about kind of masturbation as the thing that you do because
you
know,
can't
you're
have
scratching the itch, or
Yes.
or you just kind of you do it, and it's not like something that you actually cultivate, and that unfortunately kind of translates then into relationships. So that's why most people go, oh well, sex is the dessert. So if we're really busy, we just won't have sex. But I thought it was quite interesting that you actually, when it was most difficult, you prioritized the sex.
Sex is the entree.
There we go.
This is rare. Pay attention if you want.
This is it. I'd really like people to pay attention to this and hear your perspective on, well, what is the healthy role of sex in a relationship, not as just the dessert, but something that's foundational
Prayerful,
to keeping
connecting.
intimacy. I mean, just be kind of at large. How does sex shift as something is a key part of optimizing a relationship when it's given its proper role?
Well, yeah, well, I'll just start and just that, I mean, really sex is like the human herb, you know, it's the human vitamin. It's fundamental. I mean, it's called making love for a reason. It is how we generate kind of wellness in our bodies and in our relationship in so many ways. And that kind of, Rachel can talk as a doctor about the actual hormones and the chemical benefits, but love, you know, as Rachel will say, is, you know, just is the foundation of our health. And so, you know, we always felt like our love in our marriage, and sex being a part of that, was absolutely crucial for not only our marriage, but for nurture, you know, that love nurtures our children. And I think so many people make the mistake that they feel like, oh well, we just have to focus on our kids.
We have kids, so no more.
You know, no more sex. Well, and that actually the love and connection and intimacy and, you know, between the couple is actually what role models, you know, what love
And you have
looks
amazing
like.
kids.
Yeah,
Healthy, amazing kids.
and they're all like, we're so grateful that they're all in loving relationships,
Yeah.
and so you're role modeling that. So that, you know, so I think it just changing it around from kind of this dessert or this accessory or this luxury to this is part of the foundation of nurturing our marriage. But maybe you wanted to pick up on any of that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about, you know, when the bottom drops out, what do you do no matter what? Most people brush their teeth. They probably take their medicine. I'm in high favor of both of those things.
Yes.
You get to the basics, though, what your body needs.
You get to the basics, but I think it's a mistake. Well, I mean, I want to say this with a lot of sensitivity because there are a lot of people who have sex is not easy for them. They've had trauma or they've had very restrictive upbringings, and accessing their sexuality can take a moment. So this isn't for everyone, but I would say if you can find yourself in a state of openness, because I'm also, you and I are completely aligned with this, but that there is no time that you should have sex if you really don't want to. Because you're just betraying your body. And betraying your body doesn't get you pleasure. Betraying your body gets you numbness. And then you have to recover from that. So you should never have sex if you don't want to. But there's, I really don't want to, and then there's a whole bunch of shades in between, right?
Exactly.
So Doug and I would have these very nuanced conversations of, is it really a no? Or is it you'd rather not?
Where
but
are
maybe
you
you're
0
with-
to 10?
Yeah.
Are you
Literally.
Somebody,
Literally.
I can't remember what our math was, but somebody, you know, we had to add up to a 10. I think.
We have to
Somebody-
add them to a 10. Right? This is actually now. So
Right.
this started like in residency, but we still use this like because we always have this conversation, because for us sex is an essential piece of our intimacy and our marriage. So we're open to it as best we can all the time. So we always have this conversation. Where are you? I'm really tired. I'm kind of a 4. Where are you?
And if the other person is a 6,
Doug's like, I'm a 7. I'm like, that's good enough. Let's go. Somebody's got to be up for it, right? And if we're both an 8, that's a great night, you know.
Yeah,
but
if we're both a 4, forget it, you know. Like,
or 2.
You know, right.
Or that's like a little bit of sleep and wake up in the middle of the night.
Right, exactly.
Right. The other thing that I would just say is because, you know, it's so easy in our society to separate sexuality from the rest of our relationship and love and intimacy as some kind of separate thing.
Yes.
And I think one of the things I'd say is even when Rachel was working 110 hours a week in residency, even when we had 3 children under 5, you know, even when I had, you know, we were splitting the care of our kids, and I had 2 kids, you know, 2 toddlers and slings on my body and my son hanging off my back, you know, even then we would have a date night every week. And
that's so important.
And the goal was to fall back in love with each other, and just every week. And remember, we're not just co-parents, we're not just roommates.
Habitating.
Yeah, exactly. We're, you know, this is, you know, keeping this alive. And I think that, you know, a lot of people ask, you know, how do you keep a marriage, you know, 35 years in to be alive and juicy. And I think a big part of that is about, there are many things we can say about it, but one key piece of it is that prioritizing that passion and that love and that intimacy, you know, whether that's sexual intimacy or emotional intimacy, but really making that the centerpiece rather than that being the thing that kind of dissipates because you're focused on everything else. Mm-hmm.
I really love that. I quote you guys all the time, by the way, on that piece. Just that, you know, there is a dedication at least once a week. It's non-negotiable. This is your time. What happens in that time, that's creative, but it's your time. I'd love to jump into the explicit part of the podcast. We get a lot more free, so we're going to transition right now. But we can keep going on the date night stuff. I definitely want to also talk about where you're at now with your pleasure exploration, what you're discovering, and then also get into some things around relational dynamics, because sometimes things are hard, and so you two have definitely found your way through some hard things. So
we've been through some hard stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.